Captain Jiho stood on the bridge of the UNS Perseverance, staring at the message that had just arrived. His hands were shaking. The distress signal came from Talvini Prime, the homeworld of the insectoid species that had saved humanity 300 years ago. Back then, Earth was dying. Automated weapons were destroying human colonies one by one. Nobody in the galaxy helped. Nobody except the Talvini. The Talvini had arrived with their shield technology and asked for nothing in return. They shared everything freely. Billions of human lives were saved because of them. Jiho's own grandmother survived because a Talvini medical ship arrived at Mars colony just hours before the weapon swarm hit. He grew up hearing that story. Every human child did. Now the Talvini needed help. The message was simple and desperate. The Vryn Dominion was attacking them. 300 warships surrounded their system. The Talvini had maybe 3 weeks before their defenses collapsed completely. They were asking the Galactic Council for help. They were asking humanity for help. Jiho immediately sent the message to Admiral Hyun at Earth Defense Command. He didn't wait for orders. He already knew what humanity would do. You don't abandon family. That's what his father always said. That's what every human believed. Within 2 hours, Admiral Hyun responded. The entire Earth Defense Fleet was mobilizing. 27 warships were being prepared for immediate jump. No debate happened in the human government. No vote was needed. The Talvini saved humanity once. Now it was time to return that favor. Jiho watched his crew prepare the Perseverance for combat. His chief engineer Mira was already running diagnostics on every system. She was the best engineer in the fleet, famous for keeping ships running even when they should have been floating debris. She looked up at Jiho and nodded once. The ship was ready. Down in the Marine Bay, Commander Daeho was briefing his troops. Daeho was a legend among human soldiers. He had fought in the border wars against pirates and slavers. He never lost a boarding action. His Marines trusted him completely. They were checking their weapons and armor, preparing for the kind of close combat that made other species uncomfortable. Humans were good at fighting in tight spaces. Earth's gravity made them stronger than most aliens. Earth's dangers made them meaner. Ambassador Sunmi was trying a different approach. She was at the Galactic Council headquarters demanding action. The council chamber was filled with representatives from hundreds of species. She stood before them and showed the images from Talvini Prime. Cities burning, civilians fleeing, the Vryn fleet bombarding orbital stations. The Talvini need help now, Sunmi said firmly. They helped us when nobody else would. What will the council do? The council members looked at each other nervously. The Vryn Dominion was powerful. Nobody wanted to fight them. The Kelthani representative spoke first, his voice careful and diplomatic. We express deep concern about this situation. We will form a committee to study possible responses. Perhaps in 6 months we can propose sanctions. 6 months. The Talvini had 3 weeks. Sunmi felt anger burning in her chest but kept her face calm. She had expected this. The galaxy was full of words but short on action. That was fine. Humanity would act alone. Thank you for your time, Sunmi said coldly. Humanity will handle this ourselves. She walked out of the chamber. Behind her, the council members began arguing among themselves. Some were relieved that humans would solve the problem. Others were worried about what humans might do. Earth was called a death world for good reason. Humanity evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. Diseases, predators, weather, gravity, everything was deadly on Earth. Other species came from gentle worlds where life was easy. Humans came from hell and learned to thrive there. 3 days later, the human fleet gathered at the edge of Talvini space. 27 warships hung in the darkness, their weapons armed and ready. They were facing 300 Vryn vessels. The odds were terrible. Nobody cared. Admiral Hyun broadcast a message to the entire fleet. His face appeared on every screen, calm and determined. The Talvini saved us when we were helpless. They asked for nothing. They gave everything. Today we repay that debt. Today we show the galaxy what humanity stands for. We protect our friends. We keep our promises. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. The crews cheered. Jiho felt pride swelling in his chest. This was what made humanity different. They remembered. They were loyal. They never abandoned family. The Vryn commander received a transmission from Admiral Hyun. The message was short and clear. You are attacking the Talvini. The Talvini are friends of humanity. Leave this system immediately or face the consequences. You have 1 hour to respond. The Vryn commander laughed when he heard it. 27 ships against 300? The humans were insane. He sent back his own message. Humanity should stay out of Vryn business. Your little fleet will be destroyed in minutes. Go home while you still can. Admiral Hune smiled when he heard the response. It was the answer he expected. He opened a channel to all human ships. All vessels, prepare for combat. Show them why nobody threatens our friends. Show them why Earth is called a death world. Attack pattern Delta, execute. The human fleet moved forward. They didn't use the standard formation that other species preferred. They scattered and spread out, moving unpredictably. The Vryn fleet moved to intercept, confident in their superior numbers. Jiho gripped his command chair as the Perseverance accelerated. Around him, his crew worked with focused intensity. Mira was already preparing damage control teams. Every human ship knew they would take hits. They just had to survive long enough to hit back harder. The first Vryn ships opened fire. Energy beams lanced through space, striking human shields. The Perseverance shook from the impact but held together. Jiho watched the tactical display and waited for his moment. Target their command ship. Load kinetic rounds. Fire when ready. The Perseverance launched a barrage of solid metal slugs accelerated to incredible speeds. Other species thought kinetic weapons were primitive. Humans knew they were effective. The projectiles slammed into the Vryn command ship's shields at relativistic velocities. The shields held, but the ship staggered backward from the impact force. All across the battlefield, human ships were doing the same thing. They hit hard and fast, then moved before the Vryn could respond effectively. They used tactics that seemed chaotic but were carefully coordinated. They fought like wolves, not like the orderly fleets the Vryn expected. Admiral Hune watched the battle develop and allowed himself a small smile. The Vryn were about to learn an important lesson. Never threaten the friends of a deathworld species, never assume humans will fight fair, and never forget that humanity survived by being too stubborn to die. The battle had been raging for 6 hours. Jiho's uniform was soaked with sweat. The Perseverance had taken 17 direct hits. Hull breaches were sealed with emergency foam. 2 engine modules were offline, but they were still fighting. Around them, the human fleet was tearing into the Vryn formation like sharks in a feeding frenzy. The Vryn had expected a traditional fleet engagement with ships trading fire at long range. Instead, humans closed to point-blank range and fought with a savagery that shocked their enemies. The destroyer Indomitable had lost main power 30 minutes ago. Its captain refused to retreat. The crew was firing weapons manually using backup batteries. Every shot had to be aimed by hand through mechanical systems. It shouldn't have been possible. Human stubbornness made it possible anyway. Mira was crawling through a damaged corridor when the call came through. Engineering Section 3 was venting atmosphere. 6 crew members were trapped. She grabbed her emergency suit and ran toward the breach. Behind her, 2 other engineers followed without hesitation. They reached the damaged section to find a hole in the hull large enough to fit a car through. Stars were visible through the gap. Air was screaming out into space. Mira activated her magnetic boots and stepped into the breach. The wind tried to pull her out into the void. She held on and started welding a temporary plate over the hole. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, even as debris bounced off her helmet. One of the other engineers brought the trapped crew members to safety while Mira worked. This was what human engineers did. They fixed the impossible while everything around them was breaking. They kept their ships alive through pure determination. The plate sealed. Atmosphere stopped venting. Mira allowed herself 3 seconds to catch her breath, then moved to the next emergency. There were always more emergencies. On the Vryn flagship, Commander Zeth watched in growing disbelief. His fleet had destroyed 5 human ships completely, but the humans had destroyed 18 of his vessels. The math didn't make sense. His ships were newer, bigger, more advanced. How were these primitives winning? The answer came when 3 human frigates suddenly accelerated directly at his battlecruiser. Zeth expected them to fire and veer away. Instead, they launched boarding pods. Dozens of small capsules shot across the gap between ships and slammed into his hull. Magnetic clamps held them in place. Cutting torches began burning through the armor. Zeth activated all internal defenses. His security teams rushed toward the breach points. This was insane. Nobody boarded enemy ships anymore. Space combat was fought at distance with energy weapons and missiles. Only crazy species would try hand-to-hand combat in zero gravity. Then he remembered. Humans came from a death world. Crazy was normal for them. Commander Deho was in the first boarding pod. The cutting torch finished its work and the hatch blew inward. He dove through the opening with his rifle ready. Vryn soldiers were waiting in the corridor. They opened fire with plasma weapons. Deho's armor took 3 hits but held. He returned fire with his kinetic rifle. Solid bullets punched through Vryn's shields and armor. The aliens had never faced this kind of weapon at close range. Their shields were designed to stop energy beams, not high-velocity metal. Behind Deho, 20 Marines poured through the breach. They moved fast and hit hard. Vryn soldiers were taller than humans and had 4 arms. But humans had grown up in Earth's crushing gravity. They were stronger and faster than they looked. They fought with a ferocity that broke enemy morale. The Marines pushed deeper into the ship. Every corridor was a battle. Every room had to be cleared. Deho led from the front, his rifle never stopping. He had trained for this his entire career. Shipboarding actions were humanity's specialty, because no other species was crazy enough to do it. They reached the engineering section and planted explosives on the main reactor controls, not enough to destroy the ship, just enough to disable it. The Vryn crew began abandoning their posts, fleeing toward escape pods. Deho and his Marines withdrew back to their boarding pods and launched back toward their own ships. Admiral Hyun watched 3 more Vryn capital ships go dark as human boarding teams disabled their systems. This was the strategy he had planned. Humans couldn't match Vryn numbers or firepower in a straight fight, but they could fight dirty. They could do things no sane species would attempt. A new threat appeared on the tactical display. The Vryn were retreating toward Talvini Prime itself. Their commander had made a decision. If he couldn't defeat the humans in battle, he would bombard the planet as punishment. He would show the galaxy what happened to species who allied with Deathworlders. Jiho saw the Vryn trajectory change and understood immediately. They were going to drop kinetic impactors on the Talvini cities. Massive chunks of metal accelerated to orbital speeds. Each one would hit with the force of a nuclear weapon. Millions would die. He ran calculations in his head. The Perseverance was closest to the interception point. They could get there in time. But his ship was already damaged. Taking hits meant for a planet would destroy them completely. Jiho didn't hesitate. He ordered maximum acceleration toward the intercept course. His crew looked at him in shock. They understood what he was doing. They also understood why. The Talvini saved humanity. Now humanity would save them. Mira understood immediately when she saw the course change. She rerouted all available power to engines and shields. Every single system that wasn't essential was shut down. Life support was reduced to minimum. Weapons were taken offline. Everything went to defense. The Perseverance positioned itself between the kinetic impactors and Talvini Prime. The first one hit their forward shields. The impact was tremendous. The entire ship shook like it had been struck by a giant hammer. Warning alarms screamed. Hull plates buckled. But they held the second impactor hit. Then the third. Jiho gripped his command chair so hard his knuckles turned white. Around him, consoles were exploding. Crew members were being thrown against walls. The ship was being torn apart piece by piece, but the impactors weren't reaching the planet. The Perseverance was catching them all. Taking the hits meant for innocent civilians below. The fourth impact broke through the shields. It struck the ship's midsection and tore a massive hole in the hull. Entire sections were open to vacuum. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut automatically. 50 crew members were lost in an instant. Jiho's vision blurred. Blood was running down his face from a head wound. His tactical officer was unconscious. His helmsman was dead at his station. But the ship was still there, still protecting the planet. The fifth impactor never came. Admiral Hyun's battle group had arrived. They destroyed the Vryn bombardment ship before it could launch any more weapons. The Perseverance was saved. Barely. Across the galaxy, news networks were broadcasting the battle. Every species watched in stunned silence as humans fought against impossible odds to protect their allies. The images were shocking. Human ships were burning wrecks, but they kept fighting. Human crews were dying, but they never retreated. In the Galactic Council chambers, representatives sat in silent shock. They had thought humanity was becoming civilized, diplomatic, peaceful. Now they remembered the truth. Humans were Deathworlders. When pushed, they fought with everything they had. When their friends were threatened, they became something terrifying. The Vryn fleet was in full retreat. They had lost 35 ships. The humans had lost 9, But those 9 ships had taken hundreds of Vryn crew members with them. Each human vessel had fought until it was nothing but debris. Each crew had sold their lives as expensively as possible. Admiral Hyun broadcast a message to the fleeing Vryn fleet. His voice was cold and hard. You attacked the Talvini. You tried to bombard their homeworld. You have learned the first lesson about Deathworlders. We protect our own. Now you will learn the second lesson. We don't forgive threats against our family. All ships, plot course for Vryn Prime. We're taking this war to their home. The declaration sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Humanity wasn't just defending the Talvani. They were going on the offensive. They were attacking the Vryn homeworld itself. Jiho listened to the Admiral's orders from his damaged bridge. The Perseverance couldn't jump anymore. The ship was too damaged. But he smiled anyway. The Talvani were safe. That was all that mattered. Down on Talvini Prime, millions of insectoid aliens watched the human fleet in orbit. They saw the burning wrecks that had taken hits meant for their planet. They saw the species that traveled across the galaxy to repay an old debt. They understood now what humanity meant by loyalty. They understood what it meant to be family to a Deathworld species. The human fleet jumped into Vryn home space with 18 operational warships. Intelligence reported over 500 Vryn vessels defending their homeworld, plus hundreds of orbital defense platforms. It was suicide. Admiral Hyun knew it. His captains knew it. Every crew member knew it. They jumped anyway. The Vryn Planetary Defense Command detected the human fleet immediately. Alarms blared across every military installation on Vryn Prime. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. A tiny human fleet was attacking the most heavily defended system in Vryn space. It was impossible. It was insane. Admiral Hyun broadcast on all Vryn frequencies. His message played on every military channel, every civilian network, every communication system in the entire star system. What he showed them changed everything. The broadcast started with images from Earth's history. Massive armies clashing in ancient wars, cities burning in nuclear fire, orbital colonies destroyed by automated weapons. Humanity had nearly killed itself dozens of times throughout history. Wars that lasted decades, weapons that could crack continents, diseases that killed billions, but humanity survived. Every single time, then the message showed Earth itself. Hurricanes that could flatten cities, earthquakes that split the ground open, volcanoes that darkened the sky for years. Animals that could kill humans with a single bite. Diseases that evolved to be deadlier every generation. Earth was a nightmare planet where everything tried to kill you, and humans thrived there. They turned a death world into a garden through sheer stubbornness. Admiral Hyun's face appeared on the screens. His expression was calm, but his eyes were hard as steel. You attacked the Talvini. They are our family. You tried to bombard their homeworld. You learned that we protect our own. Now learn this. We are the species that survived Earth. We are the species that nearly destroyed ourselves but refused to die. We know how to burn. We know how to suffer. We know how to keep fighting when everything says we should give up. Do you? The message ended. Silence filled the Vryn command centers. For the first time, they truly understood what they were facing. These weren't just another spacefaring species. These were survivors from a planet that made the Vryn homeworld look like paradise. The human fleet didn't attack immediately. They positioned themselves at the edge of the system and began psychological warfare. Every hour they broadcast more footage. Human soldiers fighting in conditions that would kill any Vryn. Human ships continuing to function even when they should be dead hulks. Human crews surviving injuries that would be fatal to most species. The message was clear. Humans were harder to kill than you could imagine. They came from a world that spent millions of years trying to murder them. They evolved to survive the unsurvivable. On Vryn Prime, panic began spreading among the civilian population. The military assured them the defenses were strong. But people watched the broadcasts and felt primal fear. These humans were predators from a predator world. Could their defenses really stop them? The Galactic Council was in chaos. Ambassador Sunmi sat in her quarters watching the emergency session on her screen. Representatives were shouting at each other. Some demanded humanity be sanctioned. Others were praising the rescue of the Talvini. Most were just terrified. The Kelthani representative was speaking, his voice shrill with panic. Humanity must stop this aggression immediately. They're attacking a sovereign system. This is illegal under council law. Sunmi activated her communication link and her face appeared on the chamber screens. Her expression was cold. Where was the council when the Talvini faced extermination? You talked about committees and studies while people were dying. Where was council law when the Vryn attacked? You did nothing. So humanity acted, alone, as we always do when it matters. A Naxari representative spoke up, trying to sound reasonable. Please, Ambassador. Your fleet is outnumbered 30-1. This is suicide. Pull back and let us negotiate a peaceful solution. Sunmi almost laughed. Peaceful solution. The galaxy always wanted peace after the fighting started. They never wanted to prevent the fighting in the first place. The Talvini saved humanity 300 years ago. They asked nothing in return. We will repay that debt no matter the cost. That's what makes us different from the council. We don't just talk about honor. We live it. She ended the transmission. Behind her screen, council members continued arguing. Sunmi stopped listening. They didn't matter anymore. Only the fleet mattered now. The battle for Vryn Prime began on the third day. Admiral Hyun didn't attack the planet directly. Instead, he went after the orbital platforms. Human ships darted in and out of defensive range, firing kinetic weapons and missiles. They used the system's asteroid belt as cover and as ammunition. Mira's team had developed a new tactic. They would attach engines to asteroids and send them flying at Vryn platforms. The aliens had to choose between shooting the asteroids or shooting the human ships. Either way, something got through. 3 orbital platforms were destroyed in the first hour. 6 more went dark from boarding actions. Daeho's Marines were causing chaos on every station they hit. They disabled systems and escaped before Vryn reinforcements could arrive. The Vryn fleet tried to engage the humans in open battle. Admiral Hyun refused. He kept his ships moving using hit-and-run tactics. Every time the Vryn massed their forces, the humans were somewhere else. It was frustrating and exhausting for the defenders. On the 5th day, something unexpected happened. A squadron of human ships broke through the orbital defenses and descended toward Vryn Prime. Planetary defense systems opened fire. Half the squadron was destroyed. The rest kept coming. They landed in military zones and deployed Marines. Daeho led the assault on a major command center. His troops hit hard and fast, but they only targeted military installations. Civilian areas were left completely alone. Inside the command center, Vryn officers fought desperately. They expected the humans to kill everyone and destroy everything. That's what happened in Vryn warfare. But the humans did something that shocked them. When Vryn soldiers surrendered, the humans took them prisoner and treated their wounds. When civilians were caught in the crossfire, human medics helped them escape. The Deathworlders were fighting with rules and honor. They were terrifying in combat, but merciful in victory. News of this spread across Vryn Prime faster than any military order. The population had been told humans were monsters. Now they were seeing monsters who healed enemy wounded and protected civilians. It broke something in the Vryn psyche. Military morale collapsed. Soldiers began surrendering in larger numbers. Ship captains refused orders to ram human vessels. Civilians in major cities started protesting against their own government. The war was supposed to be simple. Conquer the weak Talvini and expand Vryn territory. Instead, they provoked Deathworlders who fought back with impossible determination. On the 10th day, the Vryn government sent a transmission to Admiral Hyun. They wanted to negotiate surrender terms. The war was over. The Dominion had lost. Admiral Hyun sat in his command chair and read the surrender offer. Around him, his bridge crew waited silently. They had lost thousands of friends. They were exhausted and wounded. But they had won. Prepare the response, Hyun said quietly. The Talvini must be part of these negotiations. They were the victims. They deserved justice. The formal surrender happened 3 days later. Vryn leadership agreed to pay reparations to the Talvini. They agreed to strict limits on their military. They agreed to demilitarize border systems. And they agreed to something unprecedented. Vryn officers would stand trial for the attempted bombardment of Talvini Prime. Throughout the galaxy, species watched and learned. 3 aggressive empires that had been planning expansion wars suddenly announced peaceful initiatives. Nobody said it openly, but everyone understood. Humanity had sent a message written in fire and blood. Don't threaten species under human protection. Don't assume small fleets mean easy victories. And never ever provoke a Deathworld species that remembers its friends. The human fleet began the long journey home. They left behind 11 ships that couldn't be repaired. They left behind 12,000 dead crew members. But the Talvini were safe. The debt was repaid. Jiho watched Vrin Prime shrink in his view screen from the bridge of a borrowed ship. The Perseverance was being towed home as scrap. Most of his crew was gone. He felt hollow and exhausted, but when he closed his eyes, he could see his grandmother's face. She had survived because the Talvini helped humanity. Now the Talvini survived because humanity helped them. That was worth everything. That was worth the cost. On Earth, billions of humans watched their fleet return. They mourned the dead. They celebrated the living, and they felt pride in what their species had done. When it mattered most, humanity kept its word. They protected their friends. They honored their debts. The galaxy would remember this. The day the Deathworlders went to war for loyalty instead of conquest. The day humanity showed everyone what they truly stood for. And the galaxy would be very careful about threatening human allies ever again. The victory parade on Earth was massive, but Admiral Hyun didn't attend. He was in his apartment alone, staring at the list of casualties. 12,372 names. Every single one was his responsibility. Every single one haunted him. His door chimed. He ignored it. The chiming continued. Finally, he opened it to find Ambassador Sunmi standing there with 2 bottles of whiskey. "You're not celebrating," she said. It wasn't a question. Nothing to celebrate. "We lost over 12,000 people." Sunmi walked past him and poured 2 drinks. She pushed one across the table toward him. "We saved an entire species from extermination. The Talvini population is 7 billion. You think those 12,000 didn't matter? They knew what they were doing. They went willingly." Hyun drank the whiskey in one swallow. It burned going down, but he barely noticed. "The Council wants to sanction us. Half the galaxy thinks we're dangerous warmongers. The other half is terrified of us." "Good," Sunmi said flatly. "Let them be scared. Maybe they'll think twice before attacking peaceful species. Maybe they'll actually help next time instead of forming committees." Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council was indeed divided. The formal session had been going for 3 days straight. Representatives argued about humanity's actions. Was it a righteous defense of an ally or dangerous aggression? The Kelthani representative was leading the faction calling for sanctions. His speech was long and passionate about galactic law and proper procedures. Everything humanity violated by taking unilateral military action. But when he finished, the Talvini Queen herself appeared via hologram. Queen Tessera's insectoid face didn't show emotion the way human faces did, but her voice carried unmistakable feeling. "The Council speaks of law and procedure. Where was this law when my people were dying? Where was procedure when our cities burned? You sat in this chamber and debated while our children were being killed. Only humanity acted. Only humanity kept their word." She paused, letting her words sink in across the silent chamber. "If you sanction humanity for saving us, you tell every species in this galaxy that loyalty is punished. You tell them that keeping promises is wrong. You tell them that the Council values paperwork more than lives. Is that truly what you want your legacy to be?" The vote on sanctions failed, barely, but humanity's reputation was permanently changed. They were no longer seen as the friendly newcomers trying to fit in. Now they were seen as dangerous, powerful, loyal, but terrifying. Back on Earth, Captain Jiho was struggling. He had been given a medal, a promotion, a new ship. None of it helped. Every night he dreamed of the battle. He saw his crew dying. He felt the impacts hitting his ship. He heard the screams over the communication channels. The military doctors said it was trauma, post-combat stress. They offered medications and therapy. Jiho went through the motions, but nothing helped. He had survived when 60% of his crew died. Why, what made him special? What made him deserve to live when better people died? His therapist tried to explain survivors' guilt. Jiho understood the concept intellectually. Emotionally, it didn't help. He was hollow inside. The victory felt meaningless when weighed against the cost. Mira wasn't sleeping either. She was in her workshop at all hours, designing new systems, testing new theories. If she kept working, she didn't have to think. If she didn't think, she couldn't remember watching her friends die while she was helpless to save them. Her hands shook sometimes now. She would be in the middle of calculations and suddenly remember sealing a hull breach, while crew members suffocated on the other side. She had saved 6 people that day. 37 died in other sections she couldn't reach in time. The 6 she saved felt like nothing compared to the 37 lost. Commander Deho returned to his training facility but couldn't teach the same way anymore. His students saw the change in him. He was harder now, more distant. His jokes were gone. He drilled them relentlessly on combat techniques and survival skills. Late at night, he would sit alone in the armory cleaning weapons that didn't need cleaning. His hands knew the motions. It kept him busy. It kept the memories away. He had killed 234 Vryn soldiers in boarding actions. He kept count. He didn't know why. Each number was a face he saw in his nightmares. The galaxy was changing around them. Smaller species that had been living in fear of aggressive empires began reaching out to humanity. They wanted defensive packs. They wanted military training. They wanted to learn how Deathworlders survived. The Kresh were first. They were a small reptilian species constantly threatened by larger neighbors. Their ambassador met with Sunmi in a secure location. Our people remember your actions. You saved the Talvini when nobody else would. We wish to form an alliance. We can offer industrial capacity and rare minerals. In exchange, we ask for protection and training. Sunmi studied the Kresh ambassador carefully. This was the beginning of something new. Not just a treaty, but a fundamental shift in galactic politics. Protection means we go to war if you're attacked. Are you prepared for that? War with humanity is nothing like council conflicts. We fight to win, no matter the cost. The Kresh ambassador's scales rippled in what might have been determination. We are prepared. Better to fight alongside Deathworlders than die slowly under oppression. More species followed. The Novaxi, the Eldrin, the Korthax. Each one small. Each one threatened. Each one willing to ally with the terrifying humans because humanity actually kept their promises. Within 6 months, humanity had formed a new coalition. 23 species, all committed to mutual defense. They called it the Talvini Alliance, named after the species whose crisis had started everything. But not everyone was happy with these developments. Intelligence reports began reaching Admiral Hyun's desk. Disturbing reports about something hiding behind the Vryn Dominion, something older and more dangerous. The reports spoke of the Korthan Ascendancy, an empire so ancient that most species thought it was myth. But intelligence showed the truth. The Korthan had been manipulating younger species for millennia. They pushed aggressive empires into expansion wars as a testing ground. They watched to see which species were strong enough to be useful. The Vryn hadn't acted alone. They had been supported and encouraged by Korthan agents. The attack on the Talvini was a test, a way to measure humanity's response, and humanity had caught their attention. Admiral Hyun was reading these reports when his communication panel chimed. Incoming message. Origin unknown. Encrypted with technology beyond human capabilities. He accepted the transmission. The hologram that appeared was humanoid but clearly alien, tall, elegant, with features that were almost beautiful but somehow unsettling. Greetings, Admiral Hyun. I represent the Korthan Ascendancy. You may not have heard of us. We prefer to work behind the scenes. But we have been watching your species with great interest. Hyun kept his face neutral. Inside, his instincts were screaming danger. What does the Ascendancy want? Your species shows potential, strength, adaptability. The Ascendancy wishes to recruit humanity. Serve us and you will have technology beyond imagination, resources, power. All we ask is loyalty. And if we refuse, the Korthan's smile didn't reach his eyes. Then you will share the fate of the 17 other species who thought themselves too strong to kneel. You defeated the Vryn, impressive, but the Vryn were children playing with toys. The Ascendancy has ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. We have fleets that could darken your sun, technology that could crack your planet like an egg. You have one standard galactic cycle to decide. Choose wisely. The transmission ended. Admiral Hyun sat in silence for a long moment. Then he activated his emergency channel to Earth government. We have a problem. A big one. On Earth, emergency sessions began immediately. Humanity had just finished one war. Now they faced something far worse. An empire that made the Vryn look weak. An empire that had been secretly controlling galactic politics for millennia. Jiho heard about the Korthan ultimatum and felt something unexpected. Relief. He had been drowning in guilt and trauma. Now there was a new threat. A new mission. Something to focus on besides the ghosts in his head. Mira started designing weapons immediately. If the Korthan had technology beyond humanity, then humanity needed to innovate. They needed to find weaknesses. They needed to fight smarter, not stronger. Deho began training programs for the allied species. If war was coming, they needed every advantage. The Talvini alliance would fight together or die together. Ambassador Sunmi stood before the allied representatives and told them the truth. The Korthan threat. The ultimatum. The choice between submission or annihilation. Humanity will not kneel, she said firmly. We would rather burn than bow. But we won't ask you to follow us into this fire. Any species that wants to leave the alliance, we understand. This isn't your fight. Every single species voted to stay. The Talvini Queen spoke for all of them. You fought for us when nobody else would. Now we fight for you. This is what family means. The die was cast. Humanity would face the Korthan ascendancy. They were outmatched in every way. Outnumbered, outgunned, facing technology they couldn't match. But they were humans. They came from a death world, and they had never learned how to quit. Earth's response to the Korthan ultimatum was delivered exactly one cycle after the threat. Admiral Hyun stood before the communication array and spoke directly to the ancient empire. No, just that one word. No explanation, no negotiation, no fear. The message was clear. Humanity would not submit, ever. The Korthan response came within hours. A fleet of 300 warships appeared at the edge of human space. They broadcast a simple message. This was their final warning. Submit or be destroyed. Admiral Hyun sent every ship humanity had. 92 vessels against 300. But this time they weren't alone. The Talvini Alliance sent their fleets too. The combined force was still outnumbered 2-1, but they would fight together. The first battle lasted 18 hours. Human tactics confused the Korthan. They expected traditional warfare. Instead, humans used every dirty trick they knew. Mines disguised as debris, hacking attacks on Korthan computer systems, psychological warfare. Mira's new weapons, the humans lost 40 ships. The Korthan lost 70. It should have been impossible. The Korthan had technology centuries more advanced. But they had never fought an enemy willing to do anything to win. The Korthan were shocked. No species had hurt them this badly in 1,000 years. They withdrew to regroup and analyze what went wrong. This was supposed to be simple. Crush the upstart humans and show the galaxy who ruled. Instead, they faced an enemy that fought like cornered animals. An enemy that used weapons the Korthan considered primitive, but deadly. An enemy that refused to recognize they were supposed to lose. On Earth, Jiho was given command of a new ship. The UNS Defiance, a frigate built with lessons learned from the Talvini conflict. He walked through the corridors and felt ghosts following him. His old crew, the people he couldn't save, but he pushed the thoughts away. There would be time for grief later. Right now, people needed him. His new crew needed a captain who could bring them home alive. The Korthan returned 3 months later with 500 ships. The battle was brutal. Human forces fell back, trading space for time. They used scorched earth tactics. Every station they abandoned was destroyed. Every supply depot was blown up. Every asteroid mining facility was rigged to explode. If the Korthan wanted to advance, they would advance through ruins. They would find no resources, no supplies, nothing to sustain their massive fleet. Daiho led commando raids behind enemy lines. His teams infiltrated Korthan supply convoys and destroyed them. They sabotaged enemy ships while docked at stations. They spread fear and chaos wherever they struck. The Korthan had never faced this kind of warfare. Their enemies always fought honorably. Stand-up battles with clear rules. Humans didn't care about honor. They cared about survival. Mira's engineers developed something new. Nanite weapons. Tiny machines that could eat through Korthan armor. They were dangerous and unpredictable. The Galactic Council would have banned them as too horrific. Humanity used them anyway. The war dragged on for 2 years. The Korthan kept winning battles but couldn't win the war. Every advance cost them dearly. Every victory was hollow because the territory they captured was worthless. Then disaster struck. A Korthan fleet bypassed the human defenses and attacked Mars. The colony was home to 2 billion people. Human and alien families living together. The Korthan bombardment killed 400 million people in the first hour. Jiho was in the defense fleet that arrived too late. He watched Mars burning and felt something break inside him. More ghosts, more dead that he couldn't save. The old trauma came roaring back combined with new horror, but there was no time to collapse. His crew needed him. The survivors on Mars needed evacuation. He pushed his pain down deep and did his duty. Across human space, the Mars attack ignited rage. No more tactical retreats. No more trading space for time. Humanity wanted blood. Admiral Hyun authorized Operation Final Warning. It was insane. It was desperate. It was the most human plan ever conceived. They would strike at the Korthan throne world itself, not to conquer it, not to destroy it, but to deliver a message that could never be ignored. 50 ships volunteered for the mission. They all knew it was suicide. The Korthan home system was protected by thousands of defense platforms. Nobody had ever penetrated those defenses. Nobody had ever tried. Jiho's ship was among the volunteers. So was Mira's engineering vessel. So was Deho's marine transport. The survivors of the Talveni conflict, going into the fire one more time. The fleet jumped directly into Korthan space using stolen coordinates. Alarms blared across the ancient empire. Impossible. Humans couldn't penetrate this deep into Korthan territory. But there they were. The defenses opened fire immediately. 20 human ships died in the first 10 minutes. The rest pushed forward using every trick they knew. Jamming, decoys, kamikaze attacks to clear paths. Deho's marines launched toward the throne world in stealth pods. They burned through the atmosphere using heat shields that barely held together. Half the pods burned up. The rest made it to the surface. They fought through Korthan security forces that were individually superior in every way. Better armor, better weapons, better training. But humans had desperation. They had rage. They had 12,000 dead from the First War and 400 million from Mars. They reached the Korthan ruling chamber, not to kill the leaders, but to plant a broadcast device that would beam across the entire empire. The device activated and showed images from Earth. Everything humanity had survived. The wars, the plagues, the disasters, all the times humanity should have died but refused. Then it showed current footage. Human cities burning, Mars destroyed, human children killed by Korthan weapons, human families mourning their dead. Admiral Hyun's voice played across every Korthan communication channel. We are the species that survived Earth. World that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. We survived ice ages. We survived supervolcanoes. We survived ourselves. You think you can break us? You think you can make us submit? We don't know how to quit. We only know how to survive. The broadcast showed more images. Human ships that kept fighting after they should have been destroyed. Human crews that survived injuries that would kill any other species. Human determination that defied logic and reason. We can't beat you in a fair fight, so we won't fight fair. We'll burn everything between us and you. We'll turn this war into a nightmare that never ends. We'll make every advance cost you more than you can afford. We'll outlast you, because that's what Deathworlders do. We survive. The broadcast ended with one final message. This is your last chance. Withdraw and leave us alone, or learn what it means when monsters decide they've had enough. Deho and his surviving Marines fought their way back to their extraction pods. 70% casualties, but they had delivered the message. As they lifted off from the Korthan throne world, they could see the capital city's lights flickering. The broadcast had been received. The Korthan High Command met in emergency session. For the first time in 10,000 years, they faced an enemy they couldn't comprehend. The humans were inferior in every measurable way, but they wouldn't stop. They couldn't be broken, and the Korthan were tired. They had been fighting for 3 years. Their fleets were depleted. Their resources were strained. Every human system they conquered was worthless rubble. The cost kept climbing with no end in sight. The Korthan made a decision that shocked the galaxy. They withdrew, not defeated, not conquered, but exhausted. They pulled their fleets back and sent a message to humanity. You have proven your point. The ascendancy will leave your space. We acknowledge your strength. You are not prey. You are predators. We will not make the mistake of challenging you again. The war was over. Humanity had won, but the victory tasted like ash. The cost was staggering. 50,000 human military dead, 400 million civilians lost on Mars, Kresh homeworld bombarded into ruin, Talveni colonies destroyed. The Alliance had paid a terrible price. Admiral Hyun retired immediately after the armistice. He couldn't lead anymore. The ghosts were too many. He spent his remaining years in a quiet house by the ocean, staring at the waves and remembering everyone who died under his command. Jiho took over as fleet commander. He was good at it, even though it hurt. He trained the next generation of officers. He made sure they understood the cost of war. He made sure they knew that every order had a price measured in lives. Mira became head of human weapons development. She designed defensive systems instead of offensive ones. She had seen enough destruction. Now she wanted to build things that protected people. That kept them safe. Deho opened a training academy for allied species. He taught them how humans fought, how they survived, how they turned desperation into victory. His students were from 20 different worlds. All of them had learned the same lesson. Never give up. Never surrender. Always fight for your family. Ambassador Sunmi became the first Secretary General of the Talvini Alliance. The coalition of small species had become a major power in galactic politics, not through conquest but through mutual protection. They stood together because they learned what family meant from humanity. Years passed. The galaxy changed. The Korthan ascendancy withdrew into isolation. Other aggressive empires became cautious. Nobody wanted to fight the species that made the ancient Korthan back down.